Gershom Scholem, 26 years old, comes to Israel. We're in the pre-state years. In addition to his academic endeavors, was he politically active? Was he well known in the Yishuv? And his friends, people like Agnon or Martin Buber, were these his colleagues and companions?
Well, that touches on a lot of different topics.
Okay.
I'll start with the easy one. When Scholem came to Jerusalem, it was a very small town. And so I think pretty quickly he did get to be well known as a kind of an oddity, a German-raised, not particularly Orthodox Jew who spent all his time studying Kabbalah, which was a rarity. And in light of that, he did once arrange for himself to meet with Rav Kook, who was then the chief rabbi. So Scholem, I think, did become known pretty rapidly around town. He came here, let's start with this. His Zionism was probably most closely could be described as that of Ahad Ha'am. It's kind of a cultural Zionism, less interested in political Zionism, less interested in necessarily building a state. And when Scholem came here, he basically immediately gravitated to what we would today describe probably as the extreme left of Yishuv politics. He became a very, very active member in what was called Brit Shalom, the peace the peace covenant group, which was advocating for a binational entity for Jews and Arabs. In there, many intellectuals were part of that. Many Hebrew University great leaders were part of that, including Magnus, the head of Hebrew University, including Shmuel Hugo Bergman, who was a great philosopher and close friend of Scholem, and head of the National Library at one point, the person who brought Scholem over from Europe for that job. And a philosophy professor later. Buber was also involved, but Buber only made Aliyah in 1938. So Scholem beat him here by 15 years. So that's really a different story. Later on, especially after the Holocaust and first of all, Brit Shalom fell apart. It fell apart largely because as I would say today, there wasn't really a partner. It never had any, as far as I know, any Arab participants in it, or activists. So it was kind of the Jews negotiating with themselves, so to speak, of what they're going to do with their partners who weren't there. So it didn't really...
We're good at that, negotiating with ourselves. We're good at that.
Yeah, so it didn't really lead anywhere, and it fell apart eventually. But after the War of Independence and the establishment of the state, and especially in light of the Holocaust, Scholem moved, I would say, much more to the center left, to the more moderate left, and he became a kind of spokesman for Israeli statehood. And he really, after the Holocaust, understood that there really was no choice. The Jews need their own state. They needed a safe refuge, and he became more of a centrist, although he definitely stayed on the left. After the Six-Day War, he was one of the signatories of intellectuals immediately calling for the negotiation of peace in exchange for all the territories that had been captured during the Six-Day War. So he was clearly on the left, but he became a much more of a Zionist left in a more traditional way. And in that context, he had his first big debate with Hannah Arendt, who had been a close friend, the sociologist, had been a friend from Germany, because she became a kind of a poster. It's a little early to say post-Zionist, but an anti-Zionist when she was in New York, and they had some pretty strong polemics, which later they had a huge falling out over the Eichmann trial. That's a separate topic. His relationship with Agnon, which began in Germany, was very different. I don't know too much about Agnon's politics, but his relationship with Agnon was really much more of a shared literary interest in Hasidic literature and Kabbalah. He thought that Agnon was a brilliant writer. He translated some of Agnon into German while he was still a young man in Germany, and they just became very, very close friends for decades. But I don't think that had so much to do with the political context. And it was a different circle. Scholem had a lot of social, cultural circles that he moved in, and there was the political one, and Agnon was part of a different one. And then there was sort of German intellectuals that he hung out with, and that sort of thing. This is worth pointing out that in this context of this question, that Scholem today is a topic of a huge amount of research and interest, and not only in the context of his studies of Kabbalah, but in the context as well of him as being a political cultural figure. In the last few years, numerous biographies of Scholem have come out, as well as one of his brother and a book about his family. And there's endless articles about Scholem analyzing his politics, his view about Jewish culture, his theology. I don't know that he would have thought of himself as a theologian. And he's become, even today, I would say that for people on the politically more on the left, they like to look at him as one of their kind of spiritual forefathers that they can sort of quote, bring him in on their side of the argument, let's say. So Scholem is a huge topic of discussion and of research, and in addition to the Kabbalah piece. And a lot of it has to do with this kind of social networking that he was so involved in all the time that he was living in Israel.